It didn't happen in a courtroom. It didn't happen on a battlefield. It happened on a screen. A sitting U.S. senator, a retired Navy captain, is now facing punishment from the Pentagon. Not for taking bribes, not for leaking secrets, but for telling American service members they have the right to refuse illegal orders. I'm Caitlin Collins, and if that sentence makes you pause, it should. Because the word being used here is not wrong. It's not even controversial. It's seditious. Demotion, reduced pension, military justice for political speech. That's the line we're standing on. This isn't just about Mark Kelly. It's about who gets to define loyalty in America and what happens when power decides dissent is a threat. If you believe the Constitution still matters, stay with me. Share this, because once you see how this system works, you won't unsee it. And to understand why this moment is so dangerous, we have to start by laying out exactly what's at stake. What's at stake here is bigger than a single video and bigger than a single senator. Strip the politics away, and the core question is brutally simple. Can a sitting member of Congress be punished by the military for speech that challenges the government? The Pentagon says yes. Its argument rests on one fact. Mark Kelly is a retired Navy captain who still receives a military pension. And under military law, retired officers can remain subject to parts of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. That's the mechanism, but the meaning goes much further. Because the video at the center of this storm didn't call for rebellion. It didn't urge violence. It reminded service members of something foundational, that unlawful orders are not orders at all. The administration calls that dangerous. Kelly calls the response un-American. So now we're watching two systems collide. Civilian democracy versus military authority. Free speech versus discipline. Accountability versus control. And before we can judge who's right, we need to understand how the US military and its legal power evolved to reach this point. To understand how we arrived here, you have to go back to the architecture of the system itself. After World War II, the United States made a deliberate choice. A powerful military, but firmly under civilian control. And to maintain order inside that force, Congress created the Uniform Code of Military Justice in 1951. The logic was clear. Discipline saves lives. Hierarchy prevents chaos. But the system carried a quiet assumption that those bound by military law would not also be lawmakers shaping national policy. Retired officers were left in a gray zone, no longer commanding troops, no longer wearing the uniform, yet still tethered to the institution through rank, pension, and obligation. For decades, that tension stayed mostly theoretical, until politics entered the frame, until retired generals ran for office, until veterans spoke publicly about wars, orders, and legality, until the line between civilian leadership and military authority began to blur. Mark Kelly sits exactly on that fault line. A lawmaker by day, a retired captain by statute. And when a system built for obedience encounters dissent from inside its own ranks, history tells us one thing. It doesn't stay contained for long. The pressure didn't build slowly, it snapped. The video drops. 6 lawmakers, all Democrats, all veterans or former intelligence officials. And one sentence lights the fuse: you can refuse illegal orders. Within days, the reaction turns explosive. The defense secretary calls it reckless, then seditious. The former president escalates it further, accusing sitting members of Congress of betraying the country. And suddenly, this is no longer a legal debate. It's a loyalty test. The Pentagon moves to act, not symbolically, but personally. Demotion proceedings, a potential cut to a lifetime pension. That's the moment everything changes. Because punishment isn't just about correction, it's about deterrence. The message isn't only for Mark Kelly. It's for every retired officer watching, every lawmaker with a uniform in their past, every service member listening quietly from the ranks. Speak carefully, or pay a price. If you're trying to understand power in real time, this is it. Watch closely, because beneath this public clash sits a far more dangerous question, the one no one is saying out loud. And that's where we go next. What's really being tested here isn't a video. It's a mechanism most Americans never see. The Pentagon's move relies on a quiet legal reality. Retired officers are not fully civilians in the eyes of military law. They can still be recalled. They still receive pay, and under certain interpretations, they remain accountable. That structure was designed for one purpose: control. To prevent retired officers from undermining command while still tied to the institution. But here's the shift. That same mechanism is now being pointed outward, not at battlefield conduct, not at classified leaks. But at political speech, by framing the video as a threat to good order and discipline, the department transforms dissent into disruption. And once that transformation happens, punishment becomes procedural, not ideological. That's the danger, because systems don't need bad intentions to produce bad outcomes. They only need precedent. If this holds, the message becomes clear. Your past service can limit your future voice. And when legal tools built for war are applied to democracy, the consequences rarely stop where they begin. Because pressure doesn't stay theoretical forever. It escalates, and it's about to do that again. The second shock doesn't come from the Pentagon. It comes from the silence around it. No emergency hearing. No immediate bipartisan outcry. No clear line drawn. Instead, the process moves forward quietly. 30 days to respond. Retirement grade under review. The machinery turning almost routinely. And that's what makes this moment more dangerous than the first. Because power doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it advances through procedure step by step until the outcome feels inevitable. Legal experts begin to question whether the military can discipline a sitting lawmaker for political speech. The department insists it can. That retired officers remain subject. That order must be preserved. Two interpretations, two realities. And in between them, a senator is forced to defend his right to speak. This is no longer just a warning shot, it's a stress test. If the challenge fails, the precedent hardens. If it succeeds, the boundary survives, for now. But either way, the signal has already been sent. The rules have shifted, and the people who will feel that shift first aren't in Washington. They're watching from somewhere else entirely. If you're in uniform right now, this doesn't feel abstract. It feels personal. Because you're the one hearing the orders. You're the one sworn to the Constitution. You're the one who has to decide in real time where legality ends and obedience begins. And now, you're watching what happens when someone reminds you that you have a choice. A senator says you can refuse illegal orders, and the system moves to punish him for saying it. So what lesson are you supposed to take from that? Do the right thing quietly, ask questions carefully, and whatever you do, don't say it out loud. That pressure doesn't just affect lawmakers. It reshapes behavior at the ground level. It teaches caution where courage is required. If you've ever wondered why people stay silent inside powerful systems, this is how it happens. If this resonates with you or with someone you love who serves, share this. Because these decisions don't just define policy. They define conscience. And what's happening here doesn't stop at America's borders. It never does. What happens inside the US military never stays contained. Because when America redraws the line between authority and dissent, the rest of the world notices. Allies watch closely. Not just for policy, but for precedent. If political speech by a lawmaker can be framed as sedition under military law, it changes how American democracy is perceived abroad. It weakens the moral argument the US has long made that civilian oversight and free expression are non-negotiable. Adversaries notice too. They don't need to invent propaganda when real examples appear. They point and say, this is what democracy looks like under pressure. And then there's the ripple effect. Other governments with powerful militaries take notes. Other systems learn how to use legality, not force, to quiet dissent. Not through arrests, but through pensions, rank, and fear of consequence. This is how norms erode internationally. Not with coups, with paperwork. What starts as an internal dispute becomes a signal about how power is exercised and how far it's willing to go. And that brings us to the hardest part of this story. Because once a line is crossed, the future doesn't move in one direction. It splits, and the path chosen next matters more than anything that's happened so far. From here, the future breaks into three paths. The first is the best case scenario. The challenge succeeds, the Pentagon backs down or is forced to. A clear boundary is restored between military authority and elected office. Retired service members remain free to speak as civilians once they enter public life. The system absorbs the shock and corrects itself. But that outcome requires something rare: restraint. The second path is murkier. The process drags on. No dramatic punishment, but no clear reversal either. The precedent stays unresolved. And that uncertainty becomes the point. People self-censor. Veterans in office choose their words more carefully. The chilling effect does the work that formal punishment doesn't. Then there's the third path, the most dangerous one. The Pentagon's authority is upheld. Demotion stands, pensions become leverage, and a new rule is quietly written into reality. Your past service can follow you into politics and limit what you're allowed to say. History shows us something uncomfortable. Systems rarely leap into authoritarianism. They slide, and once speech becomes conditional, democracy becomes fragile, which is why how this ends matters not just legally, but morally. Because the final question isn't what the government can do, it's what it should do, and that's where we end. This story doesn't end with a ruling. It ends with a choice, because what's unfolding here forces the country to answer something fundamental. Is loyalty to the Constitution proven by obedience or by conscience? Mark Kelly says this isn't about him, that if this was meant to intimidate, it failed. That no administration gets to decide what Americans are allowed to say about their own government. The Pentagon says order must be protected. That discipline doesn't stop at retirement. That authority, once granted, doesn't disappear. Both claims can't fully coexist. And that tension is the point. Democracy is not tested when speech is easy. It's tested when speech is inconvenient, when it challenges power, when it makes institutions uncomfortable. If reminding service members they can refuse illegal orders is treated as sedition, then the definition of loyalty has shifted quietly but profoundly. What happens next will shape more than one career. It will shape how fear, silence, and precedent operate going forward. So don't look away. If this made you stop, share it. If it made you uneasy, talk about it. And if you want to understand where this line moves next, follow what comes after this. Because this story isn't over. It's just revealed what's at stake.